How's it, everybody? Welcome back to the Rocky Fern. Today we're in the shop and we're doing something pretty cool. This is a chunk of vanilla ice cream bean tree. I'll post some pictures here. And we had a really crazy rain windstorm last year, and so the ground was super soft, and the whole root ball with the wind was just uprooted. So I ended up losing the tree, but there's sprouts coming out from the roots. It is a part of the Fabaceae family, the bean family, and so they tend to send off offshoots from the roots. But this has been sitting out in the open. It's pretty punky, pretty junk. The bark's coming right off. It's full of bugs. You can see that. But it does have some pretty nice indications of spalting. So that's going to be pretty cool to see. But we're going to turn this into a box for my niece, and we'll do some cool things like flock it, probably with pink, and we'll see how that goes. But it should be pretty fun, easy adventure, so let's get into it. Alright, we're just going to rough it out, get it to a semi-round shape. There ends up being a lot of bug damage on this, so it ends up becoming a really rustic, cool looking piece with a lot of character to it, but I wasn't able to accomplish that really nice glass smooth finish. When this tree first came down, I did turn quite a few boxes, especially for my daughter, and they turned out really nice glass finish. Vanilla ice cream bean is a relatively hard wood, and so it took the finish really well, and they still look amazing. I did flock them as well, and overall really happy, but there's very little spalting on that freshly fallen stuff, and so this wood that's been kind of maturing in the yard has some nice spalting to it, and it ends up looking pretty darn nice. This week I'm going to try to do a long format video, very little if any sped up footage, just to give you a feel of how long it actually takes to turn a piece at real speed. Alright, we'll take a freshly sharpened parting tool, and we'll get the tenon turned on both ends. You saw in the video that there's some kind of cool looking maze work, chewed out by some beetle larvae, I assume. That ends up being kind of a cool feature in the end, but they're kind of a little delicate to work with because they do flick away randomly. But I try to saturate it with the finish and harden it up, and it ended up adding to the piece. It does break away and add some character to it, but overall, I really like the end. Can't wait for you guys to see that. So we'll turn a tenon onto this, and then I'll get a smaller, narrower parting tool to take off the lid. Alright, we'll take that narrower parting tool here and get the lid turned off, and then we can start to hollow. You'll see that I'll take, even though it's a narrower parting tool, I'll end up making double passes to get double the width of the parting tool, and that will allow me to get a nice clean cut without burnishing or burning the wood or overheating the tool. I love my Japanese style flush cut saws. They do such a nice job. Unlike a dovetail saw, which I believe has a spine to it, reinforced spine, these Japanese saws are the same width, same piece of metal throughout the entire piece, and it ends up creating a nice flush cut. Alright, in this part we're gonna take the drill out, get a nice, I guess, cone cut out so that we can center the drill, get our depth cut, and kind of do a little shortcut, and then we'll use the Badger from Hunter Tools to hollow out this the base. But I like using a chisel, get the cone cut so that you can easily just plug in the drill. I've already measured off and put the tape there on the drill to see my depth, and this does help quite a bit actually. Thomas Love does this quite a bit, and I really enjoy this tip. So I'll take that Badger straight hollowing tool, and it's the Badger number 1 I believe, with a fresh cutter on there, and it does such a good job hollowing out end grain like this. As you can tell here, being end grain, you're not going to get these nice long ribbons. You do get a couple pieces that are longer than others, but typically being end grain, it's going to be short little shavings like this. And end grain can be tricky because you can get a lot of tear out, which we do experience on this piece, but it's pretty easy to take care of if you can remember to allow yourself enough meat that you can sand away and kind of get rid of that tear out. Ideally, faster speed, lighter cuts, and a sharper tool will help reduce on your tear out. The nice thing with a, long format video like this where I don't do a lot of editing and fast forwarding is not only is it relaxing to watch, but it gives you an idea of how you could easily turn out a box or two in an afternoon. Honestly, if I didn't have to etch or fill in with any special top coats, clear coats, I could easily knock out several boxes in a day with a really nice finish. Especially if I did a wax finish, something that just goes on pretty quick. This would be very, very easy to do. I do have a kind of older laser machine, and it takes me a little bit of time to get set up and just make sure everything's correct. But yeah, I'm digging this video right now just because it's pretty easy to watch, a little ASMR action, and just nice and relaxing. So continue to enjoy if you are doing so. So now I'm going to turn out the tenon on this box, and I'm using a square carbide tool. Now it's a pretty big square carbide bit, and so I find I don't have any catches if I can come in at an angle and do more of a shear cut. If you try to go 90 degrees or perpendicular to the piece, you're definitely going to get a catch, and this piece in particular, this carbide tip, can leave a very nasty catch. It can remove quite a bit of material in the less than 10 revolutions it takes for you to pull away. So I always come in at an angle and try to make the cut very light and finessed, and then just kind of work away at the material pretty nicely. So you might have noticed that I did have a little mini catch right there in the beginning, and so that reminded me to bring the tool in at an angle. Your fingers are your kind of best friend here in the shop. It's going to tell you any ridges or dips or any imperfections on the surface. And so that's what I'm looking for when I'm running my hands over it. It's a very tactile experience. Here is a robust box tool rest that I really, really enjoy. It allows me to get up and close and kind of remove any chatter I have with tools as they reach far out into the bottom of the box. I think this is a tool that everybody should have, especially returning a lot of boxes or bowls. But typically I would use a scraper in here and kind of clean up the edges, but because I'm going to paint the inside and block it, I decided to use that same square carbide tool, again at an angle, and to really kind of finesse the surface and get it all nice and uniform. I have a little bit of a dip in the back here on the bottom of the bowl or the box, And so I take this diamond shaped scraper and I try to alleviate that. I don't do a very good job at doing it, and it ends up persisting to the end. But you know, I'm trying to use every tool I have in my disposal, but that diamond tipped scraper is really, really nice to have for getting in corners, and just overall it does, you know, flat work and also curves really nicely. Get to sanding here. I think I started out at 150. I might have done 100. And then we'll go all the way up to 320, maybe 400. And then I'll end up doing actually, I don't think I use a Yorkshire grit or anything like that. I think I just take it straight to a light coating of the aqua shellac. Just a couple coats of that, and then I end up finishing using the flocking method that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But sanding is one of my favorite things to do. It does take a lot longer than I think I anticipate for, but for some reason when you end up with this just super nice gloss finish just from sanding, to me that's tactically the goal that you want. It's just not visually the goal I'm looking for. I really like a nice shiny surface. So I don't end up getting that nice flat surface here on this really punky piece, but it ends up nonetheless being nice in the hand. Yeah, as we switch out the base for the lid, you can see the depth, the thickness of the wall it's going for, and it was a good thickness. It makes the box nice and light, but still a durable feeling. But for the lid, we're essentially just gonna, flush up the surface here and use that same skew to turn out a cone, and then we'll carve out our depth, hollow it out, and pretty much rinse and repeat. So the next part now is getting our caliper tools out here and kind of getting a feel for how much I need to cut away to fit the base tenon. So we'll get the measurement of the mortise here and hollow it out and sand it, and we'll get it fitted. Here I break out my negative rake square carbide tool by Easy Tools and Easy Wood Tools rather. And I do that because I have a slight concave shape to the lid, and that negative rake is going to help me, maintain that shape without taking it away. It also is a little bit smoother of a cut. I don't have hardly any catches at all, and you can see I'm pretty perpendicular with that tool. Whereas that square tip, you really need to do come in at an angle. Again, using my best friends here in the shop, my fingers, to kind of get a feel for what the surface looks like. And I just want to make sure it's nice and smooth. Sanding will take care of most of it, but again, sanding won't remove some major defects. You got to actually cut that away. But yeah. This ends up being kind of a nice rough surface, but overall pretty smooth. There's a lot of tear out there, as you can see there. I'll take a freshly sharpened round, like French curved scraper here, and do my best here to kind of get a nice finish cut here. See, I do a couple rough fittings here. Everything's nice. After sanding especially, I tend to take off too much and the lid becomes a nice loose fitting lid. But we tape it up here so that we don't need tailstock, and I can work on the little hand knob, I guess the little finger tab up with the lid. And it is all end grain, so it's something that you have to take into consideration. Faster, lighter, sharper cuts are going to help you out with this kind of scenario. Here we are with the freshly edged, that's my bowl gouge, I believe. I end up taking it to a little bit sharper of an angle, and they do a really nice job at leaving you a better finish than the carbide tool can. This is right off the grinding wheel, and so it is very, very sharp, and I do a lot of my shaping to the lid this way. One way that I really like to use a gouge, especially a nice fresh sharp one, is to do a shear cut. And grain especially, that shear cutting is going to give you a nice solid finish that's very smooth, very little tear out. I'll take a narrow parting tool here and I'm going to do an undercut. I want a nice little undercut so your fingers have something to register when you're picking up the lid. I mean, it's not a heavy piece at all, but it's a nice tactile function of a little lid. I'll take a detail gouge or fingernail gouge, and I'll take that kind of square radius that parting tool gives, and I'll kind of give it a nice curve to it and kind of put it all together. This has a really nice sharp edge to it and allows me to do a shear cut to the point where I won't actually need to sand it. I will sand it, but it does such a good job at leaving a nice smooth finish. But I have learned that I need to use as many of the tools as I have to kind of complete the job as needed. So maybe you guys can give me some tips and ideas on how I can be a better turner, especially on these end grain pieces that can be quite difficult. So take that diamond tipped or spear point shear scraper, and I'll put in some nice little beads here just for decoration. I wasn't thinking about how many or what it to look like. I just wanted it somewhat evenly spaced, and I guess 4 on that top portion, 2 on the bottom portion was sufficient for me. And a lot of the time I'm just going off of what I feel like at the time. Here I'm trying to get a feel for not only the fit of the piece, but also if I can line up the grain. That's quite important in my artistic eye, and you know, that's just me trying to figure out how this thing was cut. But anyway, so we turn it around. I'm going to get to the bottom. This has some shark jaws that are now expanded out into the base and are giving us pretty good hold. I do take lighter cuts on this, and I always want to do a concave surface and kind of have just a 1/8 of an inch to maybe 1/4 inch rim that thing's going to set on. That way, if there is warpage in the wood or any sort of you know, cuppage, the rim, it's less noticeable if you have a thinner rim. The fortunate part is with the end grain piece, when you have a thin rim like that and you break it off by setting it down, or you have a higher chance of breaking it off being end grain. So it's a give and take that you have to kind of consider when you're doing a thinner rimmed base to the bowl, or the box in this case. So I had mentioned that this thing was full of bugs, and right before I stopped the lathe I felt a little splatter, and where I was feeling was a little beetle larva that got cut. So anyway, they make definite holes and stuff and add character to it, but I'll take that square tip, and you can see I just had a catch there. So I'll go through and just make sure I'm doing a lighter pass on that 12 o'clock surface there, but I'm cleaning up the rim, getting it nice and perpendicular to the rest of the base. But yeah, that square cut carbide definitely can catch, and I'll just verify that everything's smooth, and then I'll continue moving on. Okay, cool. So now we have the box. It's not finished yet, but we're gonna end up flocking the inside here. So I'm trying to decide if I'm gonna flock the entirety of the interior here of the base and maybe just the top side of the lid. I think I will. I think I'll do that. So that's why the interior didn't really matter how smooth you got, because we're gonna be painting it. So let me grab the paint and start on that. All right, you guys, so here we are. I got the paint, and we are going to be flocking with a pink flock, nice hot pink flock that's going to go inside. And for those who don't know, this is a flocker. So basically it's a tube, a two-part tube, has an insert and some holes at the end. Basically fill it in with, I don't know, just a little bit of flock that you think is going to be enough to cover this area. Put it on, and then you just do the motion here, back and forth like that, and it will push out a nice even coat of the flock. And that flock is just a very fine felt like material, super fine. It's going to lay out a nice even layer, and then once this acrylic paint dries, it will dry hard, and then you'll have a nice decorative accent to a box. So let's get started on that. I am going to put on a mask because that flocking material is so light and can be hard on your lungs. So let's get started on that. Alright, so I'm just going to pour some paint into the bottom here. This just lets me. There you go. Ooh, that is thick. Okay. Just take a nice little foam brush. I'm going to paint it. And you have to paint this and flock it pretty close to each other, depending on the, your current conditions, how fast that paint's going to dry. But typically you got about, I'd say 10 minutes to paint and then flock. So let's get this painted here real quick, and then we'll come back. So I'm basically just going to pour some flock in here. Kind of see that. And anyway, that's really difficult. I'm going to get the top on. And then just about a few inches away. Just flock. Nice heavy coating. Okay, and then still get some good. All the extra you can pour back into the bag, but that's what we're looking at here. I'm gonna let this dry, and then we'll slap on a logo. Actually, before I let it dry, I'm gonna tap out any excess, and I'll do that one more time. Oh yeah, look, there's quite a bit already in that. That's okay. And once it dries, it'll actually adhere to the flock, and you can rub your finger across it. It's like a felted table or something like that. But it ends up adding a really nice touch. And one thing you have to be aware of is, being here in a very humid area, let the acrylic paint cure and dry completely, maybe 48 hours. Otherwise you can develop mold on the wood and on the paint. But it's looking pretty good, and I think that adds a nice touch of color to a very nice box. And we'll come back once it's all done and cured and I get the bottom etched out. Alright guys, so here's the finished product. Wonderful little box, robust. I love the character in it. There's a ton of wood damage due to bugs and whatnot. But I think just the simple decoration elements here with the 6 rings that we have here, the nice beautiful neon pink flocking that we have going on in here is really, really nice. I was able to etch the design for my beautiful little niece. And with that pink flocking interior, it looks really, really nice. I'm going to put a few more coats on here, probably just a spar urethane to make it very smooth and whatnot. But, you know, it's a nice box, something she can put whatever she wants in there. I do like the robust nature of the box with all the bug holes and damage to it. I think it adds to the piece. One thing that you should note about vanilla ice cream bean is normally when it's fresh and you turn it, it turns super neon yellow shavings, but as it's aged, it has turned into this kind of gray spalted look, which I like. I do like the neon yellow. That was really, really pretty, but you do have to do that while it's fresh, and that's not the case now, but I really like this box. I'm going to be turning a series of these out of the same lumber for the entire family, and using different colors. And maybe I'll record that, maybe not, but it's pretty straightforward, same project. Join us next week. We have a lot of stuff in order. I think we're going to be doing another cane, a couple more boxes, and some vases. But until then, join us next time on the next adventure.